a few reasons. First of all, it is essential to maintain the residential character and zoning of Kugler Mill Road. There are some others here that will address that in more detail than I, so I'll be brief as to that. But simply having a berm there is not a sufficient anchor for that residential character. It might look beautiful. It might look like the entrance to Disney World with wonderful landscaping and so forth. But if there aren't actually houses built anchoring that ground as residential property, the other residential properties on the way down Kugler Mill as you approach Montgomery are going to fall like dominoes as well. And eventually Kugler Mill Road is going to become commercial through to Galbraith Road. That's a concern of the neighborhood. So maintaining the residential character is important. The developer in this final proposal they've submitted has made some concessions toward that end. They want to do a cut-up of the property now and leave it residential on the Kugler Mill side, but make this 103-foot or whatever back-end area rezoned and part of the larger project here. Well, that's unworkable for a few reasons. Promises from developers are wonderful, and again, I believe they're making promises in good faith here. But 5 years and a few weeks ago, the zoning commission heard the proposal for the existing Tri-Health building and approved it in 2014, and it went to the trustees, and the trustees approved it in resolution 2014-53. And in that, they required buffer go in, the buffer that's there now. It's a 30-foot buffer that the developer proposes to move. But that arrangement to put in the buffer was part of a compromise with the neighborhoods at the time and the development to make sure there was no further encroachment on the neighborhoods. And in that resolution, the trustees required as their first condition that a minimum 30-foot wide permanent landscape easement to the benefit of Sycamore Township, satisfactory and informed to the township law director, shall be created and recorded as a restriction on the adjoining parcels currently owned by Five Star Equity and identified by various parcel numbers that are among the ones here that they seek to partially rezone as part of the cut-up. So the township put in place a permanent solution then by doing that suddenly is not so permanent. But in fact, legally it is. There are 2 covenant and grant of easement filings that were recorded in 2014 to implement this resolution from the trustees. I'm very surprised this didn't come up in the township's presentation of this to the commission. The township is actually the beneficiary of those. The current trustees, 2 of the 3 anyway, signed off on this. Yet one of them's been involved in some of these neighborhood discussions, and Mr. Connor didn't seem to recall that either. There are easements which note that the property in that 30-foot buffer shall be used solely for the purpose of a landscape buffer between the development and the residential properties that are there on Kugler Mill Road. Residential properties that the same developer already owned, but they agreed to put those restrictions in place for the benefit of the township. It is expressly forbidden under the law to put anything there other than landscaping. Building is forbidden. I have a few copies of these if you commissioners would like to see them. I'm happy to hand them out. I'm afraid I didn't bring 5 copies, but I'll let you pass them around in a moment. But the law simply forbids doing this because the problem is the new building encroaches into that landscape buffer under their plan.
It does not.
There is a corner of the building on the plans, in fact, that does encroach into the landscape buffer on your drawings. It cuts a line there. It's probably only a few feet of the corner, but there's also a row of parking then as well that encroaches on there. If I could point out on the sign, or the large thing here, on this new building, the existing buffer is really hard to see on here, it's kind of faint, but it goes along the line right about here. You can kind of see the faint line. It cuts the corner of the building right there and comes down to here and extends out to about there and back. So it covers part of the parking as well, and then there's more parking beyond it, which is inaccessible because you'd have to cross that permanent landscape buffer somehow with some structure or roadway through there. For that reason, this plan is simply unworkable, and for that reason, there is no purpose in rezoning those currently residentially zoned properties. The petition should be denied for that reason, because it is pointless to do so. I don't have any problem personally with the developer putting a nice looking building somewhere on site. I prefer it to be on the other side of the existing building personally. I think that would be more in character with the neighborhood. I think the residential lots where the houses have already been torn down by the developers should remain residential and hopefully sold off or something. But none of that should be rezoned because there's no purpose. They can't build there as it is. There would have to be a change in those covenants first, and that hasn't happened. Thank you.
speak, please come up and give us, sir, come up and, up to the microphone, give us your name.
If I may I give you a couple copies of this, by the way?
Sure.
There's the resolution on top, and then the two covenants that have been recorded. If you all are interested.
My name is Jules Schulhoff. I live on Audubon Drive in Heitmeyer Farms. Before coming over here tonight, I took a cheap range finder. It's supposed to be accurate within plus or minus 1 foot, and stood at Kubler Mill and did a sight line on the tree line back there, and it's 70 yards deep. Now, somebody can deny that that's the case, but I would disagree with that. It's not a whole lot deeper than my backyard, which is a good 50 yards deep. So when you say you're going to put a residential property back 120 feet, which to my understanding would be approximately 40 yards, that leaves you only 30 yards for this building. I'm assuming that the buffer the previous gentleman was talking about is that ridge line, which is highly elevated from the parking lot on the other side. I'm not an architect, I don't understand all this stuff, but just looking at it, I agree, it's impossible to accomplish. There's just not enough real estate to make this happen. So that's my pedestrian perspective.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else care to speak? If you come up and give us your name.
I'm Ryan Kinzick. I live at 5826 Charter Oak Drive. I would like to see from the developer, before we put this to a vote, options that show that it could build something that would accomplish our goals, but also leave the zoning as is. I was in this meeting in December, and I'm here tonight. I'm not seeing anything that shows that they made effort to leave the zoning as is, and potentially still be able to build it. Things such as putting an extra layer below in the parking garage to give more parking, less outward parking lot. Maybe they can shrink that down, but there's some other things that they can potentially do. And it seems like they're just trying to go to the zoning route because they thought it was the easiest, as opposed to maybe trying some other things. I guess I'm challenging them to be a bit more creative, and come back with a plan that shows, keep the zoning as is, and then what could they come up with? And then we can talk about that.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Step up, give us your name.
Good evening. My name is Stephen Hunt. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Aronoff, Rosen and Hunt. And our firm represents...
Mike's private.
And our firm represents the Sturbridge Homeowners Association, which consists of approximately 160 households. I also represent some of the property owners in the area. I'm going to limit my issues to the legal issues associated with this zone change. And we are against the zone change and the plan change on the 00. Basically, two legal issues. First, I'm not telling you anything I don't think you know. Under Ohio law, for a township to do a zone change, the zone change must be consistent with the township comprehensive land use plan. And I looked at your plan, and the area they are attempting to rezone is designated as a residential use. It's not designated as office, retail, or commercial. It would be, in my opinion, inappropriate for the township, based on that land use plan, to do a zone change. If the applicant is interested in doing this, he first needs to have the land use plan changed so that you have consistency. That's why we have land use plans, so the developer can take a look what is proposed for this area. That's why the township spends all the money doing a comprehensive plan and modifying it from time to time. So the proposed change from residential is just inconsistent with your land use plan. The second, I just would also like to mention, I looked at the restrictive covenants recorded at the Hamilton County Recorder's Office that Mr. James mentioned, and they outright prohibit anything in that buffer area other than landscaping and buffering. It is inappropriate to put a parking lot in there or to put the corner of the building if it encroaches in that area. That was a condition of the prior approval. It's recorded against the chain of title, and it just exists, and in my opinion, is the basis why the requested zone change and plan approval should be denied. Happy to answer any questions, but those are the legal issues. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else care to speak? If so, if you come up and give us your name.
Hi, my name is Amy Kinzig. I live at 5826 Charter Oak Drive. And I just have a very simple question. I'm not a lawyer or anything. But what's the benefit to the residents? So the residents are saying this is something that we do not want. Apparently it's not in the plan for land usage. So why shouldn't we be arguing this? So for me, from my house, you know, it's going to be more lights. I can see it. I drive past it every day. People, when those houses were purchased, there were some people that were taken out of their homes because those were rentals and children lost their homes. Clearly, that was not a benefit to the residents. Is our Tri-Health going to leave? What are we getting from this that we shouldn't be fighting it? So that's really all I want to know. So why shouldn't? Because I don't want this down the street for me. And if you look at that colored picture that you showed before with the OO and the yellow, and I mean, it looks like encroaching. I mean, it's just, when you turn that, I mean, it just keeps going. So I mean, is there a reason that this is benefiting us? That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Is the microphone working?
No, speak up.
Okay, so I'll try to speak up. My name is Jack Bloom. I'm a resident of Sycamore Township. My address is 7541 Hosbrook Road, 45236. I have four items I want to talk about, and two of them are procedural, and two of them are I think, substantive related to this project. At least 6 months ago, we were in this room, and the trustees, and I think the planning commission, agreed that in future cases, there would be a sign placed on the particular site, so that the neighbors and those of us passing by, who don't live in the area, but who might have an interest, understand that there is a zone change or land use change. As far as I know, the only sign that was put on this site was at the personal expense and the convenience of the developer. And I think that was great that the developer did that, but I don't understand why after 6 months, we still can't get a sign placed on the sites, whether it's Blue Ash Road, or whether it's Cougar Mill, or wherever. And I would hope that this commission would emphasize or take some type of administrative action that the township administration would adhere to that agreement that we had. I think it'll help to smooth a lot of things in the future. My second issue, and as all of you know, I'm interested in traffic. And so I was interested in seeing the traffic impact study that was produced here. I did not have an opportunity to review the report that was submitted until just a day or two ago, frankly. So I can't make any comment on that. But I did note that the report, the traffic study, was produced by an engineering firm called TEC. Now, it so happens TEC is a traffic engineer for the township. So it's a little bit irregular, in my view, for the consultant firm that's employed by the township to prepare a traffic study for the benefit of the developer, Scott Street. I don't have any comment about whether or not the study at this point is appropriate or anything else, but I think that it is irregular for that situation. The two other points I want to make, and somebody's already made that, has to do with the land use plan. The 2008 land use plan, we've talked about it again independently under other issues and other venues, and that is the plan that governs should govern or guide the decisions by the Planning and Zoning Commission in terms of approving or understanding or modifying any type of zone changes or even PUD improvements as well. The fourth item has to do with a letter from Ted Hubbard, who is the Hamilton County engineer. He is responsible, he has full authority on all of the roadways, except for the US routes and so on in Sycamore Township, and he does have authority for decisions on Cooper Mill Road. Harry, I have this question for you. His letter of May the 3rd, 2019, requires that the developer dedicate a minimum width of 50 feet from the center line of Galbraith Road. I was not able to check the existing right-of-way on Galbraith Road. Do you know that?
I do not.
Randy, do you know?
No, I don't know.
Okay, so, well, and we're all in the same boat. We don't know, but we do have the letter, and Ted Hubbard has required, and in this case, it is a zone change, as contrasted with capital investment group issue. So I think we ought to make certain that in any type of action taken by the planning commission this evening, at least we should refer to those conditions. There are 5 of them in Ted Hubbard's letter dated May the 3rd, 2019. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clone. Anyone else wish to make any comments? Sir, if you step up and give us your name.
My name is Harry Vogt, I live at 5600 Kugler Mill. And just for the record, I'd like to suggest a show of hands or a count of those who are here, since we have a good audience, who are opposed to this zoning and redevelopment versus those that are in favor of it.
Okay, we're not gonna do that. Any other comments?
Are you afraid of the results?
I don't know.
Let's do it anyway. Who's opposed?
Stand if you're opposed. Stand if you're opposed.
You're supposed to be working for us, you guys, in the township, you're not.
Please sit down, we'll continue the meeting, or we can clear the room, whichever you prefer. No, ma'am, we run the meeting with a certain order and decorum. I said we were not going to do it, but yet some people decided they're gonna run the meeting their way. We're not going to do that.
Yeah, we know what happens when you guys run it your way. It gets-
Yeah.
Okay, is there any other comment with regard to this?
Harry, you have those pictures. My name is Steve Ginn. I'm in the Sturbridge HOA. I live at 6450 Stone Place. I've been working on this project with everyone for quite a while. Attended meetings that we had with the developer, 4 of them. I think it was that 3 of them. And so we try to work things out. I'd like to just show you, because you can look at all those drawings, it's a rather complex thing. So I'd like to just show you 5 photographs that might put a little better perspective of why everybody is so worked up about the sheer mass problem of it.
Lean in, Steve.
And, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you put up, not the zoning one, but the second one?
Well, I don't have them in any specific order.
Okay.
I
Not
got them
that one.
basically as you got them on your slides.
Okay,
So
not
you just
that
tell me
one.
which one, go forward or,
To the next one. Okay, there's the look you see, when you look at that, that's the existing building. It's about 420 feet, 440 feet back off the road from Kugler Mill. That's a shot from the edge. And you can see where those 2 cones in the front, that's where the pavement would come to, that's on there. And that proposed building location, the new one is gonna sit in the edge of that existing tree line. Now, if you go to the next picture, there's what their place looks like. That's the size of it. And the new building will be a floor lower, but basically the same mass, almost the same number of square footage. Is that one you see there? Can you just go to the next picture? There's the area, as you look at that picture right there, of where the pavement encroachment will come to, that front yellow line, and the back line is the front of the new building, which is about 200 and closer that is. Quite a bit, substantially closer. So when people, if you go to the last, I guess that's it. So where that new building is gonna sit, in that line of that pavement in front of there, you'll have about 125 feet for the depth of homes. And that building is gonna look gigantic from Kugler Mill, gigantic compared to the one you saw, the other one sitting that far back, that far above that buffer line. And they're talking about a 10 or 12-foot buffer line. It's not gonna make any difference when you move that thing that close to the road. And if you look at, lastly, the last picture, now there should be another one of them. So we talked a lot about what that could be done, what should be done along there. It's best to keep our character along with sidewalks, street calming things, and things we talked about. That's up on Montgomery Road, and we contacted to see the feasibility of putting single-family units in there. Those are really nice units up just north of the Kroger's up on Montgomery Road, and Lucky Homes is doing that, and that's a very viable thing that can go in those lots. But putting that massive building behind there, and I could go over other things that we have problems with about TIF money and so on and so forth. There's a lot of things that are working against this, and this just shouldn't be here. This thing shouldn't be allowed. If they want to build it, it should be to the south of the existing building. They can build it as tall as they want over there by Galbraith. The impervious surface ratio is terrible. We don't want more of that encroaching back into our place. I know there's not as many requirements, but you're a PUD in there. You guys have more ability to make bigger buffers and do things than just the normal. So I'm begging you, don't just do the minimum on this. Stand up and do the right thing for our neighborhoods here. That connector road brings Heitmeyer and Sturbridge together, and that's gonna be the thing over the years. We do not want another Galbraith Road turning it into, and that's the kind of things that come with this kind of slow encroachment of zoning change. So, that's it, sorry.
Hi, I'm Allison Hamilton. My boyfriend John and I just moved into 6711 Kugler Mill Road. So we're a few houses down, and I just wanted to say that I grew up with friends on Sturbridge, and this area is really sentimental to me. So the fact that we just moved in and we're hearing about this giant building being built